Permission to decide. Why would we need to give ourselves permission to make a decision? I wrote about this in my book, The Power of Permission. It's all about making what was wrong right again in your experience, and allowing our experience to flow naturally and easily, rather than creating this resistance and judgment within ourselves. So permission to decide. I want to start off with a story. It's the story of Buridan's ass. Ass meaning donkey. So picture a donkey walking along a path one day, and it's equally hungry and equally thirsty. And it comes to a fork in the road. On one hand, there's water. On the other path, there's food. And they're both equal distance apart. The donkey tries to decide, which one should I do first? Until he dies because of indecision. He could have made it to both, but because he was trying to figure it out, he chose neither. So it's recognizing that indecision is a decision. And usually for us, we're avoiding something. We're avoiding making the decision for a reason. Otherwise, we would have already decided. Usually something that we're scared of. Also something that we're holding on to. Can I let go of something in order to move me forward? So permission to decide is about realizing that neither choice is better or worse or the right decision. That whatever decision you make is the better one, especially when it comes to hard choices. I'll post a TED Talk, Hard Choices, with this video. And it talks about how hard choices are different than simple choices, but we try and weigh them quantitatively the same. In other words, we try and figure out which one is actually better or worse. Kind of like which one is greater or less than. The number 9 is bigger than the number 7. We know this. But the interesting thing about hard choices is neither one is better, worse, or equal to. There's a new way of defining hard choices. They are on a par, which means it depends which one we value more. Could be for a job, for instance. Should I be an artist or an engineer? Well, neither one is actually better than another. And in fact, if we even say that it's $5,000 extra for engineering, oftentimes that doesn't tip us over into that decision. Now, why is that? If they were truly equal, and if they could be compared that way, then a different value, like adding $5,000, would make that one better. But the reason it doesn't is because these are qualitative decisions. So it's based on something that's less tangible. And so the interesting part about this TED Talk is part of what allows us to make a hard choice is tuning into what do I value most, and that whatever decision I actually make, I'm going to make reasons, literally manufacture reasons, because I'm a sense-making being. In other words, I make sense of things and I create meaning from nothing. I choose how to see and perceive things. I create the reason for why I chose that. So in other words, if I choose the engineering job, then we'll often make ourselves feel good with whatever choice we make in the first place. So, I justify, in other words, the reasons that I made it. And the beauty is, if I hate that job, then I can still justify and create reasons on making that okay for myself. But a lot of us don't realize that power that we have. I was working with a client today, and she came up against a hard choice. And it kind of ties into what is the order of choices that we need to make. So sometimes the reason that I also can't decide, or make that decision? Is there something I need to do before that? So in this case, it was, well, I really want to take action on finding a new job, but I don't feel like I can until I've moved out of my house living with my mom. I don't feel like I can do that yet. And so it's like, okay, let's zoom back a bit then and figure out, what do you need to do in order to make peace in that situation? So in order to make that choice, there's something here that I still need to let go of. And it was the dynamic between her and her mom, and needing to let go of trying to protect her mom and her mom nurturing her. So then this nurturing relationship that's holding them both back. So when we come up against one of those decisions that can paralyze us, another piece is the ego creates two paths from nothing. It makes it seem like we have a real hard choice, that there's something to be figured out here. There must be something to be figured out, because if there wasn't something to be figured out, then we'd actually be at peace and we'd be the master of our mind, the master of our ego. But we're not, because we're trapped in that cycle of overthinking, of thinking that I must be able to figure this out. I must be able to figure out which way I should go, or when the right time is, or when I'll have the right qualification is in order for me to do the thing. And so we constantly move aside the decision from this moment into another moment. And it keeps us stuck and paralyzed because we haven't tuned into the truth. The truth is, I'm avoiding making that decision. So in what ways am I avoiding making that decision? There's a lot of self-doubt that can come up in this process of decision making. And this is when spirituality can come in really in handy in realizing that this is a benevolent universe. In other words, this is a friendly universe. And so therefore everything is working in my favor, whether or not I believe it or not, whether or not it looks like that in the moment. It's so hard to believe when things are going bad and wrong and someone dies, for instance. So hard to believe that there's a positive lesson in that this is actually here to shape me in a certain way. But when we really begin to tune into that and surrender to that and to trust that, so much more happiness and peace can come from, oh my gosh, I don't need to worry about what decision I'm going to make. If I just take the action, then I'll find out through taking the action. And it may or may not feel good. I'll be like, oh yeah, that doesn't seem to be the right way to go. Now I know, and now I can continue to take more action. So we continually halt our own momentum rather than just taking action. So our calling in life is like a motion sensor light. It lights up only when you move. Your calling in life is like a motion sensor light. It only lights up when you move. So permission to decide allows you to take the action that you need in order for that light to pop back on of your calling so that you can see the next step. Because that's the interesting part of our calling, is it reveals itself one step at a time. There's a quote I have on my website by Elizabeth Gilbert that says, curiosity is that thing, that magical thing that's going to lead you on the most amazing scavenger hunt of your life. If only you begin to trust, give yourself permission to decide, and then take that action. So there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Oh, that didn't feel good. Great. Oh, that does feel good. Now what's next? We constantly want to create certainty for ourselves, right? And that's part of what keeps us stuck, is I want to know what's on the other side of this decision before I make it. But that's the interesting thing, is we need to take the leap off the cliff, and we'll trust that we'll learn to fly on the way down. But we're saying like, Mommy, will you catch me? Right? Will you catch me? And that's not how trust and faith in the universe works. It says, you got to jump first, man. And when you jump first, oh, I'll be there. But you have to show me. Show me through your actions. So the universe doesn't want to hear what you know. It wants you to show it what you learned. Show it what you learned through your actions. And until we take the action, it keeps presenting ourselves with that same lesson to be learned. Oh, you haven't learned yet. Here's another opportunity to show me what you've learned. Beautiful thing. That's why some people call this earth school. Whether or not you believe it or not, isn't it a really freeing mentality to have, that everything happens for a reason? That it's not weakness in me believing that maybe that is fundamentally true. And whether or not it is, it certainly improves the quality of my life. But a lot of us find it hard to sink into that belief, because it means letting go of another identity or belief system that I have, which is fundamentally making up who I am. But we won't get too much into that one today. This is about giving yourself permission to decide from a place of certainty that whatever decision I make, it will work out. And if it doesn't, I am resourceful enough to figure my way out. And I love myself enough, and I hold that safe space for myself, that whenever any negative emotions come up or things that don't feel good come up, I've got my own back. And that's when we really start to be able to take action even more quickly and build that momentum, is when I realize that I am infinitely resourceful. And that if put in a situation, back to the wall, I will figure out a way. And really that has to do with how much do I trust myself, and how much do I see and know my own value? How much do I see and know my own value? And it's hard to admit to ourselves that, you know what, I've been keeping myself stuck sometimes. And so permission to decide sometimes involves forgiveness. I might need to forgive myself for something in order to move forward, because now I feel guilty for not having done this already, right? So it's really this letting go. What can I let be okay? Can I let go of the expectations I have of how I want this to be, right? That's also part of the reason why we don't decide and take action. Like, what if I actually take action on the thing that's most important to me and it doesn't work out? Then what? And so we stop ourselves before we even get started. That's why I love that quote by Zig Ziglar. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. It's about beginning. Just take the action. You'll figure it out along the way. The other quote that really helped me get started, and this is kind of impinging on permission to start, which is also in my book as well, but this is about making the decision to often start, or this is making the decision to put on something that we've been putting off. It was from the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman. He said, if you're not slightly embarrassed by your first product, you've waited too long. And it's not just your first product, it's you've waited too long if you're ignorant enough or arrogant enough to believe that your life is going to continue unaltered as the way it is. You don't know about your health. You don't know if you're going to get hit by a car. And it's not to be morbid, it's just the realistic fact that we take for granted our lives every day. So what are those things that you've been putting off that you can decide today? You don't need a near-death experience to move you forward. You can say, hey, this is worth it right now, and I would wish I would have done this. What do you wish you would have done? What do you wish you would have decided to do? It could be big, it could be small. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. But we don't want to be like that donkey, right? I could have had the water and the food. So our ego creates that sense of separation always, right? Maybe I can do both. Maybe it doesn't matter which I do even first. Maybe there's nothing to figure out here. It's very freeing when we realize that. There's nothing to figure out. My mind desperately wants to figure something out that can't be figured out, kind of like the mystery of life. If only I could know the meaning of life. The meaning of life is a mystery. We are a living mystery. So stop trying to figure it out and give yourself peace. Take the joyful action already. So there's that ego that creates that sense of separation. It says I must not be here now. it must be out there and I must have to go get it. And also, look, there's so much things that you need me for, because what the ego is afraid of doing is realizing that it's useless. Not useless in that it needs to like be avoided and go away, just that we are its master and not the other way around. So it creates uses for itself. See, like, look how useful I am. I'm helping you figure this out. So we get caught in this process of overthinking rather than taking the action that we know we need to take. You already know you need to take the action. So a lot of clients that I work with, I help really get them clarity, bring clarity forth, and then figure out what are all those barriers, which order do they go in, and then we can remove them one by one. Right, to help you make the decision that you already want to make, but there's all these little subtle blocks that are so hard to work through on your own. That's part of what I specialize in, because we don't want to be just doing things to do them. We've got caught up in that, in this achievement mode, right? In this achievement mode of like, I must have to do these things to stay busy. And I realized suddenly that's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all these things that maybe aren't really true for me. So whatever decision that you are making, you want to make sure that decision is actually real for you. Is this something that you want for yourself outside of the expectations and obligations of other people? Because that's what's really matters. We don't want to get to the end of our life, and one of the top 5 regrets people have before they die is, I wish I had lived a life true to myself, not a lie that others expected of me. Why is that one of the top 5 regrets that people have before they die? Because they don't take the time to really sink into, not figure out, but sink into the feeling of what's true for me. So that's important in the decision-making process as well. And again, that doesn't come from a thinking place. It comes from a feeling place of, I know this is right in my heart and in my gut. And it doesn't matter what my mind thinks, because my mind oftentimes contradicts that feeling, right? Because it doesn't make sense. How are you going to support yourself if you make that decision? That person might not like you if you make that decision. But it's not about them. It's about you and your happiness. So, let's bring it back. Permission to decide. What is that for you that you've been avoiding, putting off, saying I'll do later, trying to figure out which one's better? Maybe you can do both. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe whichever one you choose is the right answer. I'd love to hear from you below. What are you struggling with right now in terms of decision making? Or what permission have you given yourself to decide powerfully and take action, and share that pride down below? I'd love to support you in that decision. Start a conversation around this. This is so important to following that calling in our life. So I would love to start a conversation, to engage, support, connect with this true inner work community so that we can move forward on what's most important to us. As always, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.